I want to bring in some of all of you, because you will be listening with great interest, but also with the insights that you have from working in Afghanistan. Would anyone like to add a point or two into our discussion of the way forward? And please identify yourself, please. And I think we have microphones, yes.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here and see you all, and especially Ambassador
and your good name?
Here. My name is Wise. I run a consultancy company in Afghanistan, and I have served in a number of assignments for the development of the capacity, working with a number of government organizations through consultancy company here in the UK, but also serving UN as well, now I quite like what the ambassador has been discussing and what's said, and I completely agree with you. I have been working for the past 12, 13 years there, and I understand that how much effort has been put in behind the show. We know that Afghanistan started from scratch. So it takes a development country to steps towards the development. It takes a while, and especially with the challenges that Afghanistan is facing now. But one of the important things which I looked at the report and during the discussion, the political structure, the infrastructure, that's it's very complex in Afghanistan. But whether are we looking at the working towards the building the infrastructure behind through a strategy or through a policy, that whether with the outcome of the government to be revolved between one or two, three parties, maybe.
You mean parties as in
the political parties. So it's just, I know that it has to go through a lot of phases in order to government to get there. But the strategy towards working, it has to be done through both sides, because right now we're having a lot of problems with people who has been previously warlords, and now they have their own parties and working towards it. But now it's how to consolidate this into a stream of two or three areas. So one, I think it's a lot of work needs to be done with the government itself, but on the other hand, a lot of work needs to be done with the people itself, because people need to get educated.
Political culture, yes.
Political culture,
yes.
That's the most important part of it. And whether any areas or anything has been, are anyone looking to look at this both streams?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, the society.
I can tell you, Liz.
Okay, let's bring it. That's a very good point. Let's bring some other points. Yes.
Hi, Hamish Faulkner from the Foreign Office. I would be interested in the panelists. Hello, Ambassador. I'd be interested in the panelists' views on whether or not, given some of the political tensions within Afghanistan, the announcement recently of the alliance between Dostum Mohaqqaq and Dostum Atta, thank you, whether or not it's possible to make the kinds of reforms that the paper suggests in a context where it feels like politics is becoming more fragmented in Afghanistan.
Okay. We should have saved that one. Let's take one last one to put into the mix. I think you were the next. Yes, okay. We'll take 4 then.
Hello, I'm Leo Villermo. I work for Peace Direct, and so we have a partner in Afghanistan working on countering violent extremism. So my question was maybe better for Fauzia Koufi to respond on the civil society in Afghanistan. What voice and what impact can they have on the political discussion and on countering violent extremism? And how can we enhance or how can we promote civil society in Afghanistan?
When you say this is this new this new acronym CVE,
yes.
Is that Taliban or that's ISIS, Daesh in Afghanistan? Who's violent extremists, or is that warlords?
It's a good question, and the term CVE is very debatable as well. It would be
all forms in Afghanistan.
all form of extremism. But CVE is. I know that many people don't like to use that term. I would just use it because it's the most widely used one.
Okay. Okay. I'll come back to you in a second. Fawzia Kofi, let's bring you in here. A question from Peace Direct. I mean, Afghans don't have to be told about, especially Afghan women, about countering violent extremism. Has the civil society developed in such a way that you feel that they are engaged in battling against this? We have Elizabeth Winter here as well in the front row, who's been working a lot with, trying to strengthen civil society as well. Fawzia?
Well, Liz, you know that Afghan women have been in the front line of fighting against extremism of any kind, and they have paid a price for it. In fact, just next week, I think we will be from the Parliament presenting a paper to the Peace Council that will indicate what role we want to play in bringing peace, social peace, especially peace with justice, and also about establishing a Women for Peace network all over Afghanistan, because I think it's important that we involve women and we involve women in peace process meaningfully, not just when the decisions are being made and you bring women on the table. We want to engage more women peacefully and meaningfully and in a thorough discussion in the process of peace. If Afghanistan is in progress and if it's a country that is progressing, it's a country that is in transition to democracy. I think women, young generation, and media with civil society, they are the key driving factor for this progress in Afghanistan. Civil society is relatively new in Afghanistan post-Taliban. We had some movement of civil society. Well, Afghanistan has always witnessed civil society in different forms. We had, councils, shuras in the past, which was not, in a formatted civil society format, but we had several movements in Afghanistan in the past. It was only post-Taliban regime that civil society started being active. And I think they have a voice. They are the first one to raise voice when there is a human rights or women's rights violation. So I think the future actually of Afghanistan is in the hand of women and young generation of this country. And all the credit for all the progress in this country, I think, will go to the nation, to the people that have been so patiently experiencing and very resilient when it comes to violence of any kind. And women are in the front line of this, not only from Taliban. Yes, Taliban women issue is a revenge for them. They want to always revenge on women issue because they see women progress in Afghanistan connected with international community presence. So they want to, in a way, always revenge women. And also from people who are sitting in the parliament. In 2013, when I presented the law on violence against women to be approved by parliamentarians, there were people who were sitting in the same parliament with me and opposed the law. And many articles, fundamental rights of women, they opposed. So we have a long way ahead of us. It's just that the priority of our international friends have a little bit shifted now to more security and the harder part of life, not the softer life of Afghans.
Thank you very much. So I want you to pick up this very important point about the political culture, because that's something, of course, done by Afghans, and including a lot of involvement of civil society about changing attitudes toward elections, political participation, what the rights of citizens. Is that going to be part of the process as well?
Well, it certainly has to be. I think, one of the good aspects of Afghan elections, among several bad ones, has been relatively high rates of participation, considering all of the obstacles. Security-wise, Afghans have risked their lives again and again to vote. And in fact, the first round of the elections in 2014 was extremely high participation. So it shows that Afghans rely on that as a means of political expression and are willing to use the process despite a lot of disincentives. So I think it's credit to the Afghans, the voters, and it's also a validation against some critics who say, well, so much fraud. I mean, is Afghanistan, quote, ready for democracy? I mean, I think that's rubbish, and I think that participation shows that it is. Moving forward, though, there are many different ways to address electoral problems. I think that the fundamental characteristics of an electoral system, two of the most important, are accountability, having an accountability mechanism for voters and citizens and civil society groups as mobilizers of those bodies for elected officials at whatever level. And I think that is sorely missing. The other thing is predictability. And this is where political parties play a role in many, all successful self-functioning democracies have some kind of political party system, whether it's alternating between 2 or 3 or multiple. But one of the reasons is so that people can, candidates and their constituents can have a stake in the process, can have some confidence that if they lose this one, they can still win the next one. And that has yet to occur in Afghanistan. And so when you look at systemic reforms, without getting into the details of them, you need to think about what are the accountability mechanisms which are missing, and having better connection between constituents and elected officials is one way to do that. But also in terms of political parties, how do you organize yourself so that you can have reforms connected to your chances of getting elected in the future? And right now it's kind of a free-for-all, or every person for themselves, which is destabilizing.
And this is, you make it so clear in the report, the winner-takes-all kind of system, which is a disincentive. Right. There's no rights for the losers, as you put it. Since you're an expert on Dostum, do you want to take the question about it? It's a reminder that there are there's certain old traditional ways of organizing in Afghanistan politically and for security reasons too.
Well, I think the thing that's important to recognize is that, maybe to disagree with one thing that was said, I mean, Afghanistan was everything but a blank slate in 2001, right? I mean, Afghanistan is an ancient country with incredible traditions. One of the things that I first grew to know and love about Afghanistan, living outside of Kabul, in Bamyan province, was how amazing and resilient Afghan communities were, despite what was by that time already many years of war, let alone what has happened now. And that there are a lot of mechanisms by which people do get along and move forward despite the challenges. And I want to acknowledge what Ambassador Jawad said, because nothing about what we're talking about is in any way meant to take away from, I think, the incredible gains that have been made by Afghans. And so many people have sacrificed for that. Many people who are not Afghans, but principally Afghans, and it continues every day at alarming rates. But I think that the other thing to acknowledge is that you have this, because you have this incredible diversity in Afghanistan, because you have a lot of things that happen at the local level because they have to happen at the local level. It's hard to get around Afghanistan. It's mountainous and desert. People have had to come up with means of self-governance. They've had a pretty bad run of central governance for the last couple of decades. If you're an Afghan, you don't necessarily look to the central government for good things. You hope that it doesn't bring bad things. And that's not to say that the central government hasn't brought great things, but that trust has to be built over time. And so weaving all of that together, that complex tapestry that is Afghanistan, both socially and politically, to my mind, requires acknowledging what exists and embracing it and using it. So it doesn't mean turning over, the north to Dostum or Atta, but what it does mean is recognizing the fact that the north has its political systems, that it needs representation both at the local and at the national level. And if you don't have a system that accommodates that, you're going to lose. The system is going to fail. Because there's only two options, right? There's Singapore and Switzerland. You can either have some fantastic consolidating authority that can impose rule of law despite what everybody else might say, or you have to find a way to share power in a radically diverse society. And I think Afghanistan is much more among the second. They have to find ways for people all over the country to be able to participate, to feel ownership. And that's not, I don't think, what the status quo is allowing for. And it's going to continue ruptures if it's not addressed.
Thank you. Do you take another round of questions? Here, these two here together, and then back here.
Sorry. Steve Brooking from United Nations mission in Afghanistan. You've talked about accommodation or conflict as the two choices, Alex. And yet we're now in a situation where, from this paper, it appears that though you think, and I don't disagree, that reconciliation with the Taliban is a long way away. Every year, 20,000 Afghans die in the conflict, Taliban, National Defense Forces, and ordinary civilians. So we're talking, 60,000 dead Afghans in the next few years, if we're talking till 2019. So what is anybody doing about peace and reconciliation? Every party points at the other and says they don't have a plan. Everyone says there's no military solution, but the Americans and Afghan government in particular appear to be working on a military solution as to the Taliban. Nobody appears to have a plan for a peace process in the short term or reconciliation process. You can argue that politics and the elections, if you like, and accommodation of some sort should be linked to a peace process. But my question in particular to Ambassador, representing the Afghan government, and I don't know who represents American and peace, Yusuf, but peace, yeah. So, what is the plan? Because there doesn't appear to be one.
Do you want to take that first, Maveda? Yes, it's an important one.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a very important point, actually, and peace will be possible only if one of the conflicting parties realize that they cannot win the war. They cannot win that conflict. So as long as there are sanctuaries for the groups outside, as long as there are financial resources, and as long as they can hope that they can win this war by force, it will be hard to compel them to come and talk to us. And that's why the big change that we see with the National Unity Government comparing to the previous administration in Afghanistan is that in the previous administration, peace efforts were regarded as reaching out to certain elements of Taliban based on personal relations, tribal affiliations, and trying to kind of winning over. But the National Unity Government and President Ghani position is that unless we reach out actually peace at the state-to-state level with Pakistan, it will be hard to reach out to certain elements in group in Taliban and try to win him over. Of course, at the same time, the experience of Hizb Islami Hekmatyar indicated that these kind of efforts should continue, and it could be very fruitful. But the plan now for the Afghan government is to focus on the regional countries too, who are either are indifferent to the conflict in Afghanistan, and they should not be, such as China and or other countries who are fearful of other factors, real or illusionary, and therefore either tolerating, supporting, or assisting Taliban in any way. So the approach for Afghanistan, both politically and economically, is indicated also, alluded in the report also, becoming more and more regional. And that will be also regional, economically, regional connectivity, politically, regional cooperation will enable us actually to reach peace and stability in Afghanistan more quicker. So the plan specifically is for concern, the big change is that we would rather have the regional countries, especially Pakistan, engage with us on that process.
I mean, so many people say that there is no military solution, that in the end, as you said, all wars eventually end, there has to be a political solution. I'm sure this is a question that many here think about a lot. Just a show of hands, how many here in the audience think that there's a good chance within the next, let's say the next 3 years, that there could be a genuine process of talks with the Taliban? How many of you believe there will be? No? And how many don't? Oh, okay. Okay. This gentleman? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Wahid. I'm an Afghan student studying at University College London. It is very great to see a fantastic panel discussing Afghanistan.
What are you studying?
I'm doing biomedical sciences.
Very good.
We are seeing a growing gap between the Afghan government and the people, especially in the recent months and weeks where there was a protest and the Afghan government is claimed to have opened fire on protesters, which means it's sort of, which is an undermining of democracy in Afghanistan. And also, I've noticed that most of the youth, and especially the new generation, it seems that they have lost hope and faith in the government. So how can we ensure that faith and hope and a young democracy in Afghanistan will be maintained and further strengthened. And I've also got a comment on reconciliation. It seems that since joining Mr. Igmatiar to the peace process, the situation has gotten worse. And I'm worried that if the Taliban join, the situation might be or could be further deteriorated. And it has been so many years that Afghan government tries to reach the Taliban, and it has been so much. I think if we had sort of invested the amount of resources in a meaningful way to improve the Afghan economy, or in any other resource, any other aspect of of Afghanistan, such as empowering women, or creating or building schools, and investing on infrastructures, that would have been more useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to give the ambassador a moment to think about that. And there's a question here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arzu Naubahar. I'm an active member of Uprising for Change, which we lost 11 of our youth people called tags by the government, Ashraf Ghani. They were all master and bachelor degree young people who were for the change and who were against this mafia regime of Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai, who called the illegitimate brothers Taliban, who want to reconciliate with them, and who also brought Mr. Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who is actually the main warlord. I don't know who else you think are the warlords in Afghanistan. He's the biggest warlord. He's the murderer of 70,000 people of Kabul, and they're all doing the same job, which is killing and depopulation of people, so that when the population starts to be counted, the majority will be the Pashtun people, which they have also brought it from the Waziristan and the other side of Pakistan. Please allow me.
Your point is very important, but we're not.
My point is very important now. My question is, today we are talking about freedom, democracy. Ms. Fawzi Kufi is in Afghanistan. We think we are grateful to the West for bringing internet. We also forget that the West has taken lots of our resources out of our country. The uranium and gold and emeralds and lapis lazulis and everything from, and the young people who have been dying here, coming, passing the rivers and the seas from Turkey and Greece and losing their lives. And we are losing a big majority of resources, young people. They don't want to live in Afghanistan because Mr. Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai is a traitor himself. He has been deceiving people.
You made a very
there is
strong,
no democracy in Afghanistan. And please allow me, because I live in Great
but your
Britain,
point has been
I have
made.
the right. Please allow me. I have lost 11 of my brothers in the uprising for change, Rastakhiz Tahrir. And every day, people, the soldiers are being killed in Helmand, not only by the Taliban, but also of the people who are inside the government, and who also killed 11 of our Tajik
your point is very strong, but please let us. We need a response to your. No, but thank you for your point, and we appreciate both your anger and your passion and your commitment. Yes, no, it's fine. Yes, there is. Yes, they have been invited.
There has been no note on the embassy.
Okay, please. Thank you very much. I think we need a comment from both Fawzi and for two young Afghans who want a sense that what something is to hope for a different. Fawzi Kofi, you're sitting in Afghanistan. You see these protests which continue on the streets of Kabul for change. What can you say to the two young Afghans here about that there's something, prospects of of some changes in Afghanistan for the better?
Well,
Okay. Okay. Your passport is Afghan. Your passport. Okay.
No, my passport is British.
Okay.
Yes, but I'm from Afghanistan and I'm a Tajik.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is not the first time that Afghanistan has experienced protests, and I think it demonstrates that instead of using weapon and gun, people have other means of civilian ways of asking for their rights and for presenting their demands. I think that's a sign of progress in Afghanistan when both men and women go to the streets to demand their rights peacefully. it means that there is more culture of democracy and tolerance in Afghanistan, and people have that space and freedom to present their problem. Now, yes, the protesters have been shot to death, and there has been a committee. The parliament also was very serious. They took the issue serious, and there is a committee that is investigating. As a result, two security officials were removed from their posts. But I guess, as I mentioned in the beginning of my statement, any reform within the government should actually go align with the demand and requirement and the needs of people. Because right now, I think President is presenting few issues as reform process, which people see it not as part of reform, but as part of his own agenda, trying to expose on the people. On the peace, if I may, Elise, on the peace, because I'm a woman who have lived in Afghanistan all my life, and I think women of Afghanistan are the main victims of war, and we don't want to see them the victims of peace, certainly. So when it comes to the peace, we all agree that the outcome of any peace should be peace. Means people have a life without fighting and enjoy the basic freedom of as a human being. We welcome the fact that Ikmatyar joined the process of peace, but I see very little income output when it comes to the security in the field. We have been hearing reports about fighting in places where there was not traditionally fighting, so that's worrisome. And therefore, I think instead of wasting a lot of resources on bringing few individuals to the power, which will in fact create more atmosphere of mistrust, I think we have to put more pressure on the countries that actually sponsor terrorists. We have to put more pressure, on the state sponsor terrorists, on the state that support terrorists. And with Alex on, maybe I don't have this chance again to talk. Alex, you're very right. In Afghanistan, the culture of political removal or political marginalization of certain groups never actually worked. The time that we go to to a situation where you marginalize certain people from power, you basically try to avoid the problem, not to solve them. So it's the time that we solve the problem instead of avoiding the problem by including people who are actually actors, players in Afghanistan into the power and the process.
Thank you very much, Fawzi. Would you like to, this is, obviously part of the broader discussion of Afghanistan going forward, but I think, would you like to just make two comments?
No, yes. As far as the death of the young man, it's a tragedy, or many other young men that are dying in Afghanistan. It is their constitutional right. It is the duty of the Afghan government to ensure that they have their right to exercise it peacefully. And if their mistake has been made by the Afghan security forces or other of killing them, this should be either punished, or at least the capacity should be improved. That's one thing. There's their right. And I think you and I are Afghan, you too. We should not lose hope for Afghanistan. Who is going to build this country if you and I will give up on that? This is our home. So what do we mean when we say we are losing hope for Afghanistan? That's the only hope that we have. That's the only identity we have. We cannot actually look in the world and it says we are losing hope for the country. I don't think money, yes, there are challenges. It's a difficult life. It's a struggle. It's a continued struggle in Afghanistan. But I see actually a large degree of determination. Even actually the person who has gone on the street actually for his political right and got killed, he made a point. The fact it's a tragedy that he got killed, and the political system in Afghanistan would accommodate him to express his right. And then same thing when you mention about Dostam or Maqaq and other. Again, it's part of the political system. They have a different opinion. We realize it's a diverse country. So in the long run, their ideas, their opinion, their suggestions should be accommodated in Afghanistan. That the country should be in continuous change. We should not have a static model of how we want to run Afghanistan. But yet, we should not overreact and change everything completely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teddy Nicholson, DFID. Just starting with something Scott said earlier, you said quite near the beginning that at this point, what may turn out to be a bad election would be worse than having no election at all. I suppose, given some of the comments today, given what you said yourself, that there's enormous energy, enormously high degrees of participation the last time Afghanistan had an election, how realistic a suggestion is that? What are the actual implications of saying we should not have the next parliamentary elections in Afghanistan? And I'd also be very interested in Fazio Kofi's views on that as well, as a parliamentarian yourself.
Do you want to respond? We're running. I think we have about 5 minutes. I know you have another engagement, Mr. George. So, we were going to, and I don't know how long people want to stay, and what's your time for departure?
No, I can.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to just answer?
Shall I answer that? Yeah. Good question. And to be clear, I should have been more precise with my language. It's delay the elections, and I think the next dates, because 2019 really must happen for presidential, it would be to push the parliamentary elections and potentially district council to that time. So I'm not talking about indefinite cancellation, of course. I mean, I think it is realistic, and as I said before, it may become inevitable depending on how voter registration plays out. There was an agreement recently to have international community fund a new voter registration process, which would involve biometric technology. This could be a game changer in terms of reducing fraud, but it also has serious political implications as far as who fundamentally has access to the ballot. It will reveal where the Election Commission can actually reach voters to register them and what the real security situation is from that perspective. So my point is that that process should be emphasized, it should be urgent, it should be well-resourced, but we don't know the outcome of it. And it could produce information about access, or politically controversial issues on population and where they live that you should take the time to settle rather than rushing forward to an election date, which is well overdue. But if you force the issue, you could produce a bad election that undermines the credibility of the process and the Election Commission before the more important event in 2019.
Because there was discussion in Afghanistan that Afghans were losing hope in the election process. Frances will remember the euphoria of 2004 when Afghans came out, and somehow Afghans will know that better than us, that they said, well, what's the point of these elections? That they make it worse for us. So there's a risk sometimes in a bad election.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a few more questions. The gentleman in the front row and then two in the back. And then this gentleman here.
Hi, I'm Hamid. I'm a research associate at Chatham House. Forgive me, I haven't had the opportunity to look at your report in detail, but I can't see anything being recommended to the international community in your report. So where do you see the role of the international stakeholders when we do have these kinds of political processes facing Afghanistan in the next few years? I mean, I had the privilege of being based in Afghanistan between 2014 and 15, and I can assure you, as most of us would know, there's a lot of traffic between various embassies and the political stakeholders, the Afghans. So internationals do have a leverage and they will play a role. So I think we need to be very careful as to put all of this on the Afghans, and maybe we should be a little bit more open about what we see the internationals can do to hopefully promote some positive outcome there.
Thank you. Okay. And there's a gentleman in the back with the lovely hat.
Hi, my name is Wasiq. I'm an artist, and involved in politics of Afghanistan since I come from Afghanistan. Like the sister here said, word Afghan. Maybe you do know it, but you don't want to say it. But since I am from the country, I know I have been in there. I was born in war, and still the war is going on. I better tell that Afghan is just a tribe within Afghanistan. Not all Afghans are Afghans. When we are talking about Afghans, we are talking about Pashtuns. Okay, and second thing, from 2001, the entire world had pumped a lot of money, and especially to know how many people are living in that country, and still we don't know how many people are living. Why? Because Pashtuns don't want that. And everything about the country that you hear, you have read, is just one-sided story. You are looking at perspective from the perspective of a Pashtun or Afghan, not entire region.
Well, to be fair to the Office of the Report, I think they do try to look at Afghans right across the country with their different origins, their different identities,
Exactly.
their different interests. I
So
think, to be
not
fair.
everyone is Afghan.
Yes.
Second thing about the gentleman said about Northern Alliance, we don't have such a thing. It is United Front. And
Okay.
I don't know where this word comes from. Mostly it comes from ISI, Pakistan, which has been actually promoting their own thoughts into the West for the past years.
Thank you very much, Wesley. It's very nice of you, Afghan artists, to come and join the discussions today. Great hat. Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm not
You
Afghan,
made some
ma'am.
very
I told
point.
you a moment ago. I'm
Yeah.
Tajik from Afghanistan.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Tajik.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm not
Okay.
Pashtun.
Thank you. Yes, it's
Yeah,
very
I'm
good.
from
He was a
Afghanistan,
Tajik.
proud
Yes,
of it too
that's-
as well, but I'm not Afghan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The gentleman right next behind you, with the gentleman in the corner.
Stuart Britton, Health Prom, working in Balkh. This is a question for Fawzia Koufi and Ambassador Jawed. Thank you very much for very interesting talks. We've been hearing how much Afghanistan has changed, how much the government and administration have changed, but how much have the Taliban changed? We also hear something about that, and I'd be very interested to hear your views.
Okay, thank you. We'll just take one more here since you're sitting here.
Robert Grant from Wilton Park. I wanted to come back to the question on the peace process, or a potential peace process. It seems like there's a widespread view that if Pakistan would, obviously inside Afghanistan, but elsewhere as well, that if Pakistan would cease its support for the Taliban, everything would just fall into place at that point. And so insurgent groups tend not to come to a negotiating table if they think they can win militarily, but it's also unlikely to have a successful peace agreement if the insurgent group doesn't think that it's going to have something to gain out of that agreement that it can't get, that it doesn't have it for the time being. And so following up on that, we've seen in many conflicts around the world that talking while fighting has tended to go on for many years, in some cases even decades. And obviously, there have been different kinds of contacts that you've mentioned with the Taliban over the years. Do you see any role for continued talks, formal, informal, secret, public, that could potentially help lay a foundation, even years in the future, for a peace agreement that, the conditions for which don't exist at the moment, but again, help to lay those foundations to try and, develop understandings that could come together at some point in the future.
So the Backchannel talks. Yeah. Afghans are always talking, aren't they? I mean, they probably
Backchannel,
are.
I mean, yes,
There probably are
again,
lots of talking going on in lots of places.
Yeah,
Yes, but thank
yeah.
you for that point. Yes, very important. Do you want to start with that one, Mr. Choi?
Yes, absolutely. There's, again, I was ambassador to Colombia and involved in actually some of the peace and reconciliation effort by President Uribe. So, of course, again, a difficult process, difficult opinion inside the government about how to approach it and how to implement it. But there is no substitute for talk. And again, these talk in different level, being formal, being on track 2, track 1.5, whatever format does it take, should continue. And at the end of the day, and this also relates to the question of have Taliban have changed, just alluding a little bit. Taliban are not a monolithic movement. We have actually some very lethal elements to it, like the Haqqani group. We have other groups. So, and again, trying to continue to reach out to certain elements who may feel actually age-wise or otherwise, they've been fighting also for a long time. And there are other elements in the arena that are adding to the complications, such as ISIS and other. So all of these, despite the complication, provide an opportunity for us to continue to engage. This kind of engagement continues. And honestly, in Afghanistan, this kind of engagement started in Afghanistan almost in 2004, in some format of it. It was not formalized and didn't have much of the support of the rest of the world. But now everyone outside Afghanistan is thinking that this is the most practical, the most cost-effective way of ending the conflict in Afghanistan. And the Afghan government is committed to continue these kind of contacts and talks.
Do you think the Taliban have changed? Do you think they said the Taliban of today is not the Taliban of when it
Well,
was in power?
age-wise, they've changed. They've realized actually that the ideology that they stand for, the type of government that they has no ground in Afghanistan. No one is really nostalgic about the rule of the Taliban in Afghanistan. So naturally, if they want to be a relevant political power, they're going to be changing. They're going to be changing their approach. They're going to be changing their recruiting methods. They're going to be refining their message. That's normal because they are, in addition to being a fighting force, but they're also a political movement.
And also, they're more divided now. There's no one ideology. There's more hardline ones, more pragmatic ones, and.
Not only that, but also the resources that they received for their funding are also diversified. So they have that creates also different kind of connection in relations, not only in the region, but also to criminal elements, to narcotics, and many others. So it's a complicated picture of when you see to what is called as a Taliban. It's not a monolithic movement led by one person.
Princess, I wonder whether on the comment of what you've seen from your sense of experience, be part of the international community in Afghanistan, where outsiders can help and where actually their help is not needed and actually can be counterproductive. Looking forward, where would you think the international community can and should help?
I mean, I think by now, 16 years after 9/11, I think, of course, the Afghans must decide for themselves. I think we made this. We have to be a little careful when we say, as we used to say, it should be Afghan-led. Now, the question always was, whom were the Afghans? Of course, it must be led by Afghans and by the Afghan people. It should not be led by self-promoters, and particularly by people with guns. And I have to say, to take a little issue about the deal with Hekmatyar. One thing is to talk and reach an agreement with a serious fighting force, which you have no other option but to eventually sit down and negotiate. I personally think that Hekmatyar, who I think I would agree with whoever called him an assassin, he's an assassin, and notorious for never keeping his word. But I think that one has reached an agreement with someone who was at most a security nuisance and have brought him to the center of the stage in Kabul.
Thank you. Fawzia, some questions to you. There was some interventions from the floor of people who are angry with the way the evolution of the situation in Afghanistan, feeling that it's an unjust situation, one which favors one ethnic group over another. Did you want to make a comment on how you see it now that you're a parliamentarian and trying to work from within?
I think the comments from the floor very much relate to the statement that I made in the beginning of my talks was about the power, the lack of power, proper or appropriate power sharing, especially when it comes to the inclusion of different sides. I think that was the main reason for establishment of national unity government, which now is losing its way when it comes to sharing of power. But there was one more question also about Daesh and the peace process. Daesh is a very complicated phenomenon in Afghanistan. They are in east part of Afghanistan, but also they are in north and northeast. They are also, some of them are in my country, unfortunately, in my province, unfortunately, my country as a whole, but in my constituents, basically. In east, they have a different route. The route is basically opposing Taliban. But in north, you see some of these elements of Taliban that are not happy with Taliban anymore. They shift the color of their flag from white, which was the color of Taliban flag, to black. So it's very complicated, and we must, admire our troops fighting for, against Taliban Daesh. They had gains. There were talks post 2014. Afghanistan might collapse when the withdrawal happened, but our very brave security forces proved that they resist. But let me also make it clear that our security forces are not fighting against Daesh or Taliban just to keep the two leaders. They're very unhappy about the policy of our leaders. They're fighting to keep the state stable. So there is a distinction, there is a differentiation between, how the public and the security forces relationship is, which is very good. But when it comes to our two leaders, they're not very popular. I mean, the president is certainly not very popular among our security forces. So the fact that our security forces are fighting is not to keep the power of the two leaders. There is a misunderstanding. And I know that the US will bring more troops, which people see that as a signal of more attention and more support for Afghanistan. But I hope in the meantime that those troops will not be used against people, or the international community support for Afghanistan will not be used or should not be used by the leaders against the people of Afghanistan. I'm one of those who have been advocating for more troops and support for Afghanistan, because as a woman, I don't want to go back to 2001 and 1999. But in the meantime, I don't want to live in a situation, and many other Afghans, we don't want to live in a situation where, the machine gun that should actually target a Talib should target citizens. That's a fundamental issue. The citizens' rights to be protected, and the power sharing should be fairly distributed among people who are. I know that there are many problems. We don't have strong political parties. Even both leaders, people who are around him, they don't share the same values. They don't share the same ideology. There are extremists around president. There are extremists around Chief Executive Officer Dr. Abdullah. But in the meantime, that's the reality of Afghanistan. We have to live with the reality. The reality is that if we don't include, there might be a potential security risk that you put it with Talib and Daesh challenge, then I think our forces will not be able to challenge all of these questions, or at least, defeat all of these issues that they might face.
Thank you very much. We're going to take one last question, just because it was a young gentleman. You're going to better be a good question.
Hi. When we talk about Taliban,
yes, sir.
My name is Hamaina. I'm from Afghanistan. When we talk about Taliban, we didn't mention where they get their militarily and financial support. Just we mentioned it like they have been sent by God.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to say is that Hillary Clinton in an interview with CNN explicitly admitted that we created Taliban with cooperation with ISI of Pakistan. So we can very clearly say that they were created by the US. So now my question is, was that a failure of a policy, or was that a deliberate plan to come to Afghanistan? Yeah.
I think I'm not sure what Hillary Clinton said. She may have meant that because it goes back to the days when the United States and the Saudis and working with the ISI.
That we created them in cooperation with ISI of Pakistan. And we have evidence that the American soldiers gave them weapons, and they have been transferred from one side to another side in helicopters. So it can't be clear that
Americans want to. Okay, yeah. I don't know. I think it's hard to. There's so many origins, but whether the Taliban grew out of the madrasas of Pakistan, whether they were created by the ISI, whether it was an organic movement. There's been many discussions about the origins of but your points. Well, it's okay. We'll keep you made your point. Did you want to say anything to a young Afghan who's got a? No. I think everyone's got their own view on the origins of the Taliban, and maybe we'll suffice it to say that they're.
Politicians, they just make stories that some young people, they follow them, they support these terrorist groups, they kill innocent people. So politicians, they don't make it clear to us.
Well, I think it's fair to say that now we find ourselves in a time where, I mean, the Taliban, as part of the people of Afghanistan, they will be part of an eventual political settlement. Those who want to come to the table and accept the laws of Afghanistan, be part of the constitution of Afghanistan. I think that's generally the hope in Afghanistan. So let us hope the people of Afghanistan find a way forward. Do you want to have one last word from either of you since this?
Yeah. USAID answered that because the USAID was involved for a long time with the Mujahideen and later with the entire thing.
Yes, well, that was a different historical period in Afghanistan, and yes,
yeah.
Yes,
I think.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well,
the origins are very tangled. Yes. Yes.
Good room for debate after the event as
yes,
well.
We have a
outside.
reception where we can discuss all of these issues. Yes.
The thing that I would say to kind of go back to where Scott started is that I think that there's a sense that after all of this time and investment, we have come to a point where there's been incredible gains, but there is also a sense of stagnation and some deterioration that is happening with the security situation. And I think everybody who cares about Afghanistan wants to see what it is that's going to inspire both Afghanistan's leaders to do better, but also something that's going to bring all of the energy of the Afghan people into solving their problems instead of creating discord. I think there's no question that the vast majority of Afghans would prefer there to be peace. Many Afghans, probably at this point a majority of Afghans, have only seen war, and that's unacceptable. But that solution, that set of solutions is going to be Afghan supported by the international community, but it's going to have to be Afghan. And I think our purpose in writing this report was to say that if there's going to be progress, there's going to have to be a jolt to the political system. What has happened for the last couple of years of infighting, a sense of deterioration, that has to be turned around. And we can't wait for a grand political bargain with the Taliban to make that happen, because it may be in the offing, it may not be, but to sit around and hope that it's going to be the solution, I think would be a tragedy for the country potentially. And so it is actually up to Afghans, all the way from the president and the CEO down to people throughout the provinces, to figure out how to breathe a spark back into the political system in the next couple of years that's going to reverse that sense of decline, that's going to include more people, and therefore create the long-term conditions for peace.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to bring an end to our formal gathering, but there is a reception outside so the conversation can continue. And I think, speaking for all of the panelists, I think we will take this as the fact that the Afghans and non-Afghans and people from the people of Afghanistan who came out today, that it's an affirmation that all of us still want to see Afghans build upon the successes of the past, but also do so in a way that Afghanistan has a real chance of moving forward. And I think that's something that all of us can agree. And I think we should salute the efforts of USIP working with ODI to try to tackle some of the issues that Afghans will want to face in terms of a challenge going forward politically. So thank you very much to all of you for coming out. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Fawzia Kofi, for being with us for so long on a line from Afghanistan. Thank you for your contributions. May you and your colleagues go well, and we all hope to see you in Kabul, Samdori, Barakchan one day soon. Thank you very much.